So ever since I got Canon C70, I've always been trying to get this cinematic anamorphic look, which gives you this beautiful blue cinematic anamorphic flares and oval bokeh and all that buttery smooth image. And I've tried here and there. I added some flares, I added some filters to try to mimic the look, but I could never get the legit look that like super expensive lenses and cameras give you. So funny enough, this company called Vazen reached out to me and they gave me a loaner, this beautiful heavy lens, which we're going to talk about today. This is 40mm from Vazen. There we go. This is a beautiful piece of art. And let me tell you, this is a piece of a lens. So let's talk about it. What's up guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Roman and I'm a filmmaker based in Miami, Florida. So let's break down a little bit the anamorphic look and what is it about that makes these films shot on these cameras and lenses looking so good and given that premium look. So we need to talk about four things: the blue anamorphic flares, the oval bokeh, the distortion, and their perspective. So as I mentioned before, there are some things that you can fake and mimic that look, and you can achieve some of these things, but to achieve true anamorphic lens look, you surprisingly need to shoot on anamorphic lens. And in this video, we're going to answer if this lens checks all those boxes. So what's the most important thing about any lens or any piece of equipment? Are you happy with the quality this lens provides? Are you happy with the image this gives? And am I happy? Yeah, I've been having this lens for about 2 weeks, so I haven't got a lot of experience with it, but we took it to a couple of the shoots and we experimented with it, and here's what I came up with. So after watching this video, do you think this lens checks all the four boxes I just mentioned? Have you seen the flares? Have you seen the oval bokeh? Have you seen the perspective? And have you seen the distortion? So the most noticeable probably out of this footage you saw was the blue, beautiful flares. So they would come up every time you point at a car or any pretty much white light that points directly at the lens, and the flares would be all over the place. And I mean, to no surprise, because there is like a blue square inside of the lens, which probably somehow distorts and produces that flare into the image that we see finally. Now the bokeh does look oval, which is pretty cool and unique, and I noticed that right away, especially in the city shots at night. If you look at here at some of these shots, you could totally see oval bokeh. The distortion, this was the first thing that I noticed, so it's pretty interesting how it actually gives the depth of field. It's not a depth of field you get from a photography lens, not even from like a video lens, but an anamorphic lens has some unique perspective that you get in depth of field. Like it's almost stretched out, and not even the bokeh is different, but the way the background is blurred is different. So I totally see that. And the wide perspective, yes. This lens produces an image ratio 2:39:2.1, which is pretty much super wide image that you saw in this video. So how does that actually work? Funny enough, this lens, if you shoot it right out of the box and you just slap the lens on the camera, you're gonna get a pretty interesting, ugly image. So what it happens is the Canon C70 has a Super 35 sensor, and the way this lens shoots is pretty much, it's almost like a square with like round vignette around, and it has a 1.8 factor of a squeeze, so you have to de-squeeze it later. So pretty much the top and bottom shoots normally, but the sides are squeezed, so you get the square of original image when you shoot. But then when you put it in your editing software like Premiere, for example, you have to de-squeeze it at 1.8 times. So you can either do it during the import of the footage, which actually in Premiere you don't get a 1.8 option. So what I did, and correct me if that's a wrong way of doing it, I pretty much zoomed in 180% to my horizontal, but I haven't touched like the vertical ratio, and I came out to pretty good result. Also, interestingly enough, the aspect ratio is 239:1, but the resolution Canon C70 shoots is 4K. But if I crop my sides and tops, somehow I ended up having 5120 to 2144 resolution, which is pretty much 4K 239:1. But if I wanted to crop this to 4K, which was, let's see, 4096 to 1716, I would actually crop in a bit to an image, but I don't know, really weird. I ended up having 5K image. I don't know what's wrong with me, what's wrong with the camera, but that's what I got, and it seems like it's great. Now, after you saw this little short clip that we shot, you probably think, oh, that's cool. I might get one and shoot and get the same thing, and let's see how it goes. Well, let's talk about some other things before. Was this lens easy to use? No. We shot it 2 different ways. So the beach sequence you saw, I shot it on the gimbal. So I have Ronin RS2, and surprisingly enough, it holds the C70 with this lens, and this lens is like 4 pounds pretty much. It's heavy, it's a solid piece of metal. By the way, I actually really like how this just opens like that, so it doesn't screw in or anything. It just has this like air pressure. Super cool. And then here you just have all manual focus. So you have manual focus that goes around like crazy, and you have your manual aperture, which is kind of cool because when you put on the lens on the camera, you don't get to pick the aperture in the camera. It just says f/0.0. So you turn your aperture here, which is T2. So they don't say f2, in cinema lenses they say T. So this whole video was shot at T2, so wide open. So it's really hard to focus actually. So on Ronin, I was able to attach the focus puller, and I could control the focus ring over the focus puller on a Ronin, which is pretty handy and actually worked out great. And I also had the Ninja Adamus monitor connected to it, and I had focus peaking. So everything in red on the monitor was pretty much in focus, so I could see when is my subject in focus, and I could pull whichever other direction I need to fix the focus. But then all the other shots in the city that we did, I did pretty much handheld on one wheel, which is kind of cool. So I had some stabilization, let's just say, using the one wheel, but everything else was pretty much handheld. So I was pulling focus right on the camera, and just a lot of times keeping the same distance between subject, or yeah, kind of getting lucky with some of these focus shots. But let me tell you, using Ronin was so much easier, and probably I had like 90% of the shots in focus, where using hand focus in the city on one wheel, that was really hard. So there I probably got like 60-70% shots in focus, but shooting slow-mo, keeping the same distance kind of helped me to pull the focus, and also using focus guides and focus peaking. Now, after you learn some of the things about this lens, you probably check the price on this, and it's like $3,000. It's expensive, but let me tell you that it's actually cheap compared to lenses you can get for cinema cameras out there for cinematography world that give you this pretty similar results. Yeah, that only cinematographers would see the difference, but most of the time regular people like me and you wouldn't even notice anything. But yeah, some of these lenses are like $50,000, so compared to that, this piece of equipment is actually cheap, having it at a $3,000 price tag. But I know, I'm sure this sounds kind of ridiculous, even though I'm saying it's cheap, but it's pretty expensive for a lens. But what I'm trying to say is, for this territory lens that produces those kind of results, I think it's actually a pretty good price, especially looking at it as it has such a good build quality. It's pretty much a solid piece of metal, and to my opinion, it checks all the boxes, and they also do give 3-year warranty, so that's good. So is this lens for you? Should you buy it? Would I recommend it? I think this lens has a niche, and for example, me, I wouldn't shoot all the time on this lens because it doesn't have autofocus, and it's really hard to pull focus on it unless you have Ronin, but even then, it's a big setup. I would say this lens is a really good piece of equipment for somebody who's shooting documentaries, somebody who has a focus puller. So if you just shoot the video and somebody pulls the focus for you, I mean, that's a solid yes. I would totally recommend this lens for someone like that. So I would definitely be using this lens more often when I would be shooting cars or bikes, for example. If you would just point at the light, the bokeh looks so beautiful, and the anamorphic flares, they just look so rich, and we always see that in premium high quality films. So it's kind of cool to be able to shoot it in such a small package and affordable. Again, it's not cheap, but it's affordable compared to those big setups they use in real movies. The main downsides about this lens is probably the size and the weight, but I mean, I understand it's a cinema lens. I guess it has to be that heavy because it's made out of metal. But also at first it was kind of weird. I had these weird wobbles shooting at 120. It almost feels like it was the camera because I haven't seen that later, but it's not a rolling shutter. But let's say if I would move left and right too fast, it wouldn't like have the rolling shutter, but it kind of like wobbled, almost like the IS was working in a weird way. But I haven't had that since then, but that's the only thing I noticed. And if you're a cinematographer like me that just shoot run and gun films, commercials, yeah, if this is one-person crew, this would be really hard to use. You need at least a second person to pull the focus, or maybe use this lens at a specific shot that you need in a video. So for example, like me, like I said, I will be using when I'm shooting cars or bikes. So anytime I have a night scene with lights, totally will be using this lens. Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be making, and I've been promising, more videos about especially Canon C70 because I've been learning a lot more about it. And honestly, the more I talk about this camera on camera, I learn more about it. So it's more like I'm trying to share the knowledge with you, but I get to know more, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think I'm getting sidetracked. All right, thank you so much for watching. Peace.